All right, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being willing to convene your caucus. My wife is over there recording this, and we're going to resort to a phone because I bought like 8 new batteries last night. All 8 of them are dead. Right now, that happened. So we don't have a proper camera for now. I'll just ask if you have to get up and walk around, just go around that way, because if you walk in front of her, you're cutting right in front of the camera, and we're recording this for the benefit of those who couldn't make it today, and for yourselves if you want to review anything. Okay, so I know for some of you this is your first precinct caucus, and if you're feeling a little bit nervous about it, I want to assure you that absolutely every convener had a first caucus, and they all felt nervous the first time. At least I did. Maybe it's just me, but I'm guessing that's a somewhat universal experience. I'm going to take things step by step so that you're going to know everything that's going on. And the important thing when you're actually in front of your caucus attendees is take the same approach, go methodically, step by step, so that you don't lose anybody. If you manage that, you'll basically be okay. So, let's start with your packet. On the outside of it, you've got an inventory sheet here. There's a list of items. Each one of these items is supposed to be in your packet. Those little marks you see there are marks we made as we put everything in the packet, so everything has been checked over. Everything should be in there, but just because I like being really cautious, I'm going to ask everybody to please go through your packet, make your own little marking system, check that everything is in there. Don't wait until the night before the caucuses. If there's a problem, I need to know. The sooner you let me know, the sooner we can get it resolved. Do be aware that you've got tons and tons of papers that are 8.5 by 11. And they could blend it together, so you may have to go picking through and figuring out just what stuff is.
Is everything titled the same on the form as it is on this list?
With basically the exception of one very important exception. The top thing says SD63 DFL script, and this is the SD63 DFL guide. The guide and the script. I just got to settle on one word. We called it the guide, we called it the script. It's this document right here. So-called, yeah.
Can I see it? Yeah.
So-called because you can treat it as a script. You can just read from it if you want to, and it's not terribly exciting for your attendees, but you will get through everything. You can do it that way. And there are bits that you do need to read. They're inside with a little heading to say this part you need to read. The platform statement, the affirmative action statement, a letter from the state chair. The rest of it, the italicized parts, are suggested wording. You don't have to say those exact words. You just have to somehow get yourself through it. Also on the inventory sheet, I've got some bullet points, the things that I decided are the most important parts. If you remember those, even if you forget everything we say here today, you'll get through it. You just remember those bullet points or recheck them. And just for your convenience, at the end of the caucus, I put in what to hand out, a few things that are supposed to be handed out to your attendees, and what to turn in, which is like all the forms that got filled out, all the blanks we can reuse, all that stuff needs to come in, and anything else is yours to keep for a souvenir or giveaway or whatever you want to do. So the guide will start out with stuff you do before the caucus, because you do have some preparation to do beforehand. Bring a box, something used for a ballot box, something to collect ballots in. You've got ballot sheets in here. You'll want to cut up most of those ahead of time. I recommend you leave at least one uncut so that if by some chance the facility that you're in lets you use a photocopier and you think you need more ballots and you've already got people there, you can run off more copies. If you need more ballots for your precinct, you know your precinct's better than I do, and the estimates of this and some other forms are just a guess. So feel free to make more copies ahead of time. Bring some painter's tape because you'll have to put up signs. Bring scissors in case you will have some stuff that you need to cut probably after you get there. Bring some pens and pencils. A lot of the preparation work you're going to have to do is for the actual ballots. You'll find that's a lot of the work that you're trying to deal with because people are going to start coming in at 6:30, and we're anticipating less turnout than we had in 2008. But if you convened before, probably more than you've seen in any other caucus, except for 2008. So you want to be.
Did you say your sentence that you just said? You were so fast, I didn't even hear it. You said you probably, and then I heard 2008.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm still a little. background noise and whatnot. Unless you ran a caucus in 2008, this will probably be the biggest turnout you've ever seen. In almost all precincts, Judy's apparently being an exception, the majority of people are there to vote the presidential ballot and just leave. So you're going to see a huge number of people, but not only a fraction of those staying. That's going to be very typical. Don't panic about it. That balloting is a lot of your preparation work. When you set up your room, and you're considering traffic flow, just think primarily about getting people signed in, getting them their ballot, and after that, you put out whatever else you're going to put out. There's some things that the DFL requires you to lay out. I'll show you those in a moment. A literature table that campaigns can use, and some people are going to stay. But the key part to worry about is that balloting. If you get there right at 6 o'clock, Tim?
Other thing besides, if they're ballot, they can take that and fill out and leave, but get them signed in first. And as treasurer, I gotta say, they can also contribute before they leave.
If you get to contribute, that's good. It is a pretty strict rule. They must sign in to get a ballot. I can imagine there'd be people who don't because they really don't want to sign up for the party. They don't want us to have their information. Too bad, because that's part of the reason I think the party wants to do this ballot is to get all that information. So they must sign in before they get that. So that's the main preparation you have to do.
The information is not sold to any companies or anything like that. It's used by the party and their candidates, so they'll get that kind of literature.
Right.
But we won't be, you can tell them, we won't be selling it to any other organization.
If you've got a big crowd, you're not going to have time to explain that stuff. Don't worry about it. If it's crowded, you're just trying to get them signed in, get them their ballot, and you don't have to try and explain everything to everybody if you've got a rush. Yep, Mike.
There is the legal designation for their signature. It's a legal thing too. In other words, people come in and they scribble and that's it. No. They have to act.
I see what you're saying, right. Mike is saying it's not enough for somebody to put down a squiggle and said they signed something. We have to have an address. The email and the phone number are optional, but we have to have an address. And I think to understand that we have to be able to go back and confirm that they voted in the right precinct.
Right.
There's not much we can do about it afterwards. We know from experience, there are going to be people who show up at the wrong precinct. It happens. Our credentials people always find a bunch of those. But if we've got their information, we can put them into the right precinct. So we've got to have the mailing address. So get there. Yeah, Judy.
Are we gonna have, sometimes we've had the maps of a precinct.
You got those.
Okay, good, so that we can get their address and say you are in this precinct.
Yep, we'll go through all that.
All right.
So we're still before going through all the stuff you got up in your room.
All right.
You're supposed to be able to get into the school at 6. So try and get there by 6. If you can get there early and they let you into the room, terrific. You get extra time, good. If you can get your sign up and balloting ready to go before 6:30 and you got people who want to vote, that is fine. Go ahead and start signing. You really got to start signing by 6:30, even if you've got other stuff not yet done.
Will there be how will we know what room we go to? Will there be a list there?
Yeah, the site coordinators have figured that out or are figuring that out. So check with your site coordinators, and also your site coordinators' contact information is in your guide. So if you want to know beforehand, here's their email address, here's their phone number. So ask them which room you're in if you want to know.
It's on page 19.
Yeah, page 19. All right, so that is, okay, so folks, it's real important to keep all the noise down, because remember, this is on video, and your conversations are being picked up on the recording. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Patricia?
Good morning.
Hello.
Morning.
I brought you some bagels and some coffee.
Yay.
And I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for what you're doing right now. You are reading in the papers that we have districts who are not able to get volunteers, who don't have funding, who don't have space, and they're struggling to welcome, the crowds that really want to be part of our party. And I think that is pretty tragic. So I have to confess that the half of sewer that we lost said that they would just so be happy to come to our caucus so that we don't have to deal with all of these challenges that we're going to have to deal with. So I just wanted to say thank you for volunteering and thank you for doing what you do. I want to be available to you to, whatever you need, and Of course, you know, I'm gonna run for reelection.
Yay!
And it has been really my absolute honor to represent you, and I am ready for this session, ready for the election, going to be campaigning in rural Minnesota a lot, to get majorities in both houses. So I hope for your support in doing that. You have been a great district, and Eric, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. I have to go to a
I guess that means
retreat.
now I have to go to rural district with her or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we have to do that. We have to elect majorities that can help us do the work that we need to do. I am the appointee of the Senate to the ethnic councils, and we are reviewing some of the new directions for the councils. So I have to go back to St. Paul. But thank you again. for
Wow,
doing
I
this.
can't go to St. Paul without a permit. How do you get in?
Well, thank you. Thank you again for everything. I really appreciate it.
All right. Okay, so we talked about what preparations you have to do before the caucus. Get there at 6 so that you've got as much time as possible to get your room set up. Sign-in needs to start at 6:30. You're supposed to start convening at 7, but play it by ear because in some of your precincts, you're gonna have still a pile of people coming in just trying to get signed in, and that might not be practical. So if you can't start right at 7, that's okay. Just deal with the circumstances you've got. Everybody's gonna be a little bit different, that's why I can't give you precise instructions. Yeah, Bob?
Don't we have certain times that we have to do that?
That's what the party says. Realistically, if you've got a pile of people coming in at 7 to sign in, then you can't. If you have to convene late, convene late. Because you're also trying to run the balloting as well as get the caucus started. And depends on how much help you've got with sign-in. If you've got other people to handle sign-in, maybe you can start convening with the people who are already there. You know, maybe you got people out the door and you want to wait a little bit, just see what's going on at the time. You know, maybe I probably have it in my head because I was at a really big precinct in 2008 where it was pretty chaotic, maybe because of the size. And so that's why I'm being really lenient. If you can't start at 7, I'm not gonna come down on you. Do what you can to convene as soon as you can, but if you can't start 7, that's okay.
But you're not suggesting that, you know, if 10 people are still not signed in, that, and 20 people are ready to have the meeting, you're not suggesting that
I would start in those circumstances.
you would?
If you've got, 20 people sitting and 40 people waiting to sign in, then you might want to wait.
Right.
You're just gonna have to play by ear. I just can't give you an exact direction, which is why I'm not doing that. Do what you gotta do. Okay, all right. So it's important to go through this document particularly beforehand. I mean, I want you to look at what everything is, and for those of you who see it a little bit later. This is inventory listed in the front before the caucus. Don't wait till the day before, maybe today or tomorrow, ideally. Go through the inventory and make sure you've got everything that's in here. And do read the guide or script. I'm sorry, in a couple of years, I will try to settle upon the word guide or script. But right now, both words refer to this document. Just go ahead and read it. You're not gonna remember everything, but you'll know where everything is. And it tells you about things that you need to do to set up, a lot of what I just talked about here. Okay. Next, be aware that you're going to get some people using an absentee participation form. And this is new terminology, and I think this might be why there's a little problem we're having this year we haven't had before. I've been getting a lot of these that are absentee votes. So that's the intention, to be absentee votes. Even though the form says in 2 places, this is not for absentee voting. There is no absentee voting at a caucus.
Where did you find that form?
It's the one the state issued this year. So I got it from the state. Yeah, you got it.
This is for what purpose, you said?
For absentee participation. So
If they want to be on.
we usually call these a delegate letter. You might know that term,
Oh,
or an
yeah,
absentee
yeah.
nomination form, because we allow people to run for delegate without being present. They put in their letter or their form. Now we try and have them use a form saying, I would like to be elected as a delegate. We're getting some this year, we're getting a bunch this year actually, where people are just putting out a presidential candidate, and that's it. And when I contact them, either they say they don't want to be a delegate, they're trying to vote absentee, or they just don't even respond. So if you got letters like that, and most of you I think probably do, record them as having attended on the sign-in sheets. There's a space in the sign-in to mark them as a letter participant. But you can't count their vote for anything, and if they didn't say they want to be elected to something, don't elect them to anything. So they get recorded as having attended, and unfortunately, that's it.
And if you have any beforehand, that's the first thing to do, because you don't have to catch up with it, right?
That is a good thing to do. Do it with, play it by ear in terms of how busy your sign-in table is, but at some point, you need to get them marked onto the sign-in list.
Some of them will actually send not the form, but, or just a letter with a friend who does come to.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they'll come in and they say, I have a letter absentee letter from you.
Right.
Yeah, and that's okay. That is fine. A letter's okay. Yep.
So the first thing you can do if you're not in attendance is sign up to be a delegate.
Right. Right. Now the party's been specific that conveners who are convening a precinct that's not theirs can go over to their precinct and vote, and then go back to the precinct that they're convening. So, especially because you're in the same building
Yeah,
as your precinct, just walk over there, you can cast your ballot, give Dan your letter,
Yep.
and get back to your own precinct. And you've got a tiny precinct, I think you'll find that fairly simple.
So, but are other, I get that now, which I blatantly did not before, but do other people get that then? I mean, what's happening for people who think that they can be absent and still participate in choosing, the presidential preference?
Well, their vote doesn't count. It says here twice on here
Okay.
in bold lettering, this is not for voting. But I think they changed the word nomination to participation this year, and my theory is that that's fooling a lot of people
Yeah.
thinking it's an absentee vote.
Right.
Plus, the DFL's been pushing absentee voting the last couple elections. So we've got some people fooled, is what I think. And I tell you that I do contact the people who send me these, and I explain it to them, I ask them, and they don't want to be delegates, they just wanted to vote for their candidate. And I'm getting from supporters of both candidates, so I think it's just individuals making that mistake. Something, the really big thing about these letters, remember them, because sometimes conveners have just forgotten them, and that can cause problems later on. We can get credentials challenges. It's a real pain in the rear end farther down the line if you get a letter and you didn't include it. You don't have to necessarily elect the people with the letters, because that actually has happened, that someone with a letter didn't get elected, but you at least need to consider them. So
Take the
check.
letter, when you get the letter, write them in on the sign-in sheet as if they were attending, and just say, by letter or something.
Right,
Right.
and check
Make
your,
sure they get written in so they don't get forgotten.
and a couple of your packets do have letters already in them that I've gotten physical copies of, but most of you, I'm forwarding emails to you. So check your emails. If they're from me, you really need to see them. Those might be your delegate letters. All right. Okay, so I think that gets us up
The
to,
absentee form
yeah.
on the checklist.
Sorry, say
It's
that
written
again?
I don't
in,
see the absentee form.
it's written in on, kind of
Oh,
in the
yeah, I
middle.
forgot to print it. It's up here.
All right.
Yep. All right, also beforehand, some documents you need to put out. This is the official call, it's all the rules governing the caucuses, convention process, you need to have that available. Well, we don't need that back, so if somebody wants to wander away with it, fine, or you can keep it. Don't give it to me, I'll just end up recycling it. Consider political memorabilia, or your recycling. Constitution and bylaws. So we can't violate this when people come up with new ideas in the caucus. We do have to stay within the Constitution and bylaws. And the other thing you need to put out, this is the ongoing platform. I can see people maybe looking at this before offering a resolution. Even if you might find that no one is really interested in looking at these documents, but as party rules, we have to have them out and have them available.
It's good thing to have not too, because someone may ask a question, the answer is it.
You're right.
You're gonna have to use that as the source material.
I would suggest putting that further inside in the sign-in table, because you don't want the sign-in table to get bunged up with people looking through all sorts of stuff they don't need to look through yet. You want the sign-in table nice and clean, you want just your sign-in forms, and you've got two sign-in forms. One is pre-printed with people's names in it. These are people who attended the last caucus, maybe the caucus before that, I'm not sure, but they're prior caucus attendees. And if this is like 2008, the vast majority of people will not have their names in here. And even a lot of people who do won't bother looking through here, they'll just go right to the blank sign-in forms, which is the other kind that you have. And I'm using Greg Bastian's packet, so Greg, I'm sorry I'm mucking up your packet. It was neat to start with. As long as I'm fingering and stuff, anybody got like some sugary donuts or something? Okay, so these are the blanks. It's all the same information except we don't have the voter's name already in here. And there's a part marked caucus chair only. It's actually not marked that on the blanks. This is not where attendees put in that they want to run for something. This is just for your use to mark who actually got elected to the space here for Senate District delegates, Minneapolis, only, you don't worry about that if you're not Minneapolis. And people got elected as precinct chairs. So yeah, you want to mark that on here as well as on our other forms. And again, these are, well, the pre-printed ones came from the state, so that's just my guess as to how they picked the names. The blank ones, we took our guess as to how many you're going to need. If you think that we underestimated, that's fine. It's only an estimate. Go ahead and make as many more as you want to make. And if you get extras left over, fine, just turn them in. We'll use them next caucuses. Yes, Martin?
One trick on this is, this can cause a really big bottleneck, people signing in, because they're mostly gonna show up close to 7. And what you wanna do is have a bunch of ink pens and spread these things out, A through D, E through, etc. So you don't have everybody hunting through just one pile. And then also set up several stations on the table with blank ones and have pens there. Otherwise, you're gonna have a long line of people all going through the list looking for their name.
Right, and if you've got people who are saying things like, I have voted before, I should be on the voter registration roll. We got a lot of that in 2008. People didn't understand these were prior caucus attendees and thought they were the regular, they didn't know it wasn't a polling place. You've got people who don't know this isn't a primary and don't know it's not a polling place. If people are that lost, they're not on the pre-printed sign-in list. And you know that you can direct them right over to the blank sign-in forms. Yes, Mike?
I was going to suggest one other thing. Every once in a while, you get a guy that knows the lawyerese. It's wise to have in your back pocket Robert's Rules of Order, because you'll get a guy and he'll tie up the whole thing with legalese and stuff. And that's what gets you out of this. Is, well, I got Robert's Rules of Order. I'm going to negate your argument so that we can keep on going. You don't have to use it, but just because you have it.
So just remember, you're a chair. Ultimately, it's a pain in the butt to overturn your rulings. So you'll win. All right. So convene at 7 if you can. Yes, the guy does say 7 o'clock sharp, but if you can. And then you want to go through here for the business you have to do. All right. So once again, the italicized parts are for you to speak unless they're marked as DFL platform statement or affirmative action statement or something. This is suggested wording. You don't have to say this, you can. As far as doing introductions, it depends on how many people you got there. So that's something else. I can't tell you what your precinct is going to be like. You're going to have to make that decision for yourself. Let's see. So the first part, you explain what the caucus does, and you've also got a shorter agenda in here. Once again, my apologies to Greg. So much for his, oh, yes. Sorry, back in just a bit. You also got precinct maps, and you've got these signs, so to tell people where they are. And when you start, you want to like hold up the map or something. That's why you got 2 maps. You can pin one up by the wall they come in maybe, and put up another one saying, do you all live in this area? Because there's a really good chance you got somebody who's in the wrong place. The precinct numbers changed a couple elections ago. A lot of people still haven't got this figured out. So you want to be aware of that.
There's 2 signs also, one for the main lobby or entrance door and one on the door of your room.
Right, so that's why you want to check on it. It just saves problems later on. Okay, so I was looking for the agenda. So somewhere in here, there is a 1-page agenda. Because of the balloting and all the sign-up forms, we've got a lot more paper in here than we normally have. And this is also why you want to go through it beforehand, not when you're trying to find stuff. All right, I'll look for it later. You got a short version of the agenda, and if you're comfortable enough with what's going on, it's all you need. just use that. You don't necessarily have to have this in front of your hand. So this is a tool you can use as you need, except for the parts that need to be read. So you explain what the caucus is going to do, what's on the agenda, and again, you're going to have people there for the first time, so make sure you go carefully, one bit at a time, so that they don't get lost. Next is challenges. If somebody wants to bring up a challenge to someone else, they can, because they want to say this person doesn't live in the precinct, or they were helping the Republican candidates last time, they can do that. It's trouble you don't want to invite by bringing it up if you don't have to. So if no one makes challenges, I even put it underlined here, skip this part. But if it happens, you've got a challenge form. And again, my apologies for mucking up your stuff. There is a challenge form stuck in here somewhere. I only gave you one because, at least in all time I've been involved, there's never been a challenge. I'm honestly expecting every one of these blank challenge forms is going to come back blank. All right, well, we're done. All right, fundraiser announcements. Speaking of which, yes, the next thing is to announce the spaghetti dinner. This is not part of the state's business, it's ours, because the spaghetti dinner is how we get the vast bulk of our money. The money we collect at the convention and at the caucuses, we hope pays for the cost of the convention and or caucuses. But the spaghetti dinner is how we pay for the sample ballots and the door knocks and our tables at neighborhood events and the snacks for the convener training. That's a big deal. What Felicity's doing right now is going through packets and putting in.
I've put in the ones that haven't been picked up yet. Those of you who are all sitting here, I will then scoot around as unobtrusively as possible and get them in your hands.
All right.
Because I've got them labeled to correspond roughly. There's a few more for every packet, hopefully. But the number of delegates you have was the number of flyers you got.
Yeah, the reason we're doing that is that the people who are going to show up and leave aren't going to be coming to the fundraiser. They're not that interested in coming. So we're targeting the people who are actually interested in staying. And the number of delegates you get was our best estimate as to how many people you'd actually have in the room. So don't hand out those flyers until you get to this part where you're announcing the spaghetti dinner. And then just explain what I said. Now, this is how everything gets paid for. You know, and when you get to the caucus part, you just make this we hope covers the cost of the caucuses. So I think people understand that. We usually get pretty good attendance at the spaghetti dinner after caucuses.
Also, I can send anyone who wants it a PDF if you want to print out a bigger flyer that you could maybe take to a chalkboard or the wall or something like that.
Or to make more copies of that, I assume.
Yep, I can
Okay.
send you whatever you need, but this was done at FedEx, so I tried to keep the numbers down to what would really be appropriate.
Okay, yeah.
Otherwise,
Again,
Eric will
sure,
holler
yeah.
at me.
Like that with everything else, if you think I gave you too little, feel free to make more because I can't know about every precinct. All right, then you've got a quick reading from the DFL State Party Chair. So that needs to be read. What's that?
What's the entry you want?
5.
Let's see, that was on, 5. And then you need to make rules for candidate visits, and you want to do that early because candidates could be coming in at literally any time because they're trying to get to as many precincts as they can, so they're probably right at 7 showing up at the first precincts that they visit. So you want to make rules for how much time you're going to let candidates speak. And a little trick, and those of you who come to the Central Committee meetings have seen me do this probably a number of times. If they want things to go a certain way, I usually phrase it as, the chair would entertain a motion to do this. So you just say, the chair would entertain a motion, or I would entertain a motion to let candidates speak for 2 minutes.
Half a minute, 1 minute. I mean, no more than a minute. You're gonna have so much going on.
That's up to your caucus. That's not set in stone, that's what your caucus wants to do. Yeah, so just, again, just look at what else you're trying to deal with and come up with the time. And if they want, your people attending want to do something else, they can.
On that, if you have 2 minutes and 2 minutes for questions, they will stretch on questions for a lot longer,
Like
so
10
watch.
minutes,
At
15
2 minutes and say, we really need to get on.
Right.
Patricia will be out in the hall for anybody who's got more questions. Can you catch her in the hall? Of course, she's trying to get the next
Maybe
one.
then we can also say that you always have opportunities at the central meetings to come talk to the candidates then
Yes.
too.
That is true, yes, you can.
Absolutely, that is
Make,
true.
we'll encourage somebody to run for central
When
committee.
they
show up.
And also, a lot of them will be at the spaghetti dinner.
Yes.
But the main thing is just get that rule set, preferably before candidates come in. And then introductions, again, play that by ear. If you've got a room full of people coming in, maybe don't take time with that, especially if you're starting late. Just skip that. And if you do, just be aware, in a small room it probably won't be that much of an issue, but when you get to like medium-sized caucus, the first people introduce themselves will just say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm from over this part of the precinct. And eventually they start talking longer and longer during their introductions, and you will get to the person who is going to go on literally indefinitely until you shush them up. So maybe start off saying, take like 30, no more than 30 seconds, introduce yourselves, but be prepared to step in, have to cut off somebody and say, remember their name, try to remember their name, so you can address them by name and say, I'm sorry, so we really need to keep move on to everything else. They'll pretty much understand that. That's why this comes at the beginning. Read the affirmative action, outreach, DFL affirmation statements. And so that's marked here in nice big capital letters. These parts actually do need to be read. So for here, you do want the guide in front of you. And there's an affirmative action reminder. So every time you vote on something, or you need to reread that. And then you get to funding the precinct caucuses. Again, there's wording here that explains what we do with our money. If this sounds an awful lot like what you just said for the spaghetti dinner, explain that. We'd like to. We need a little bit of money to pay for the caucuses tonight. So the money we're donating, we're hoping will just cover our costs of renting these facilities. People get that. So I think Tim would know, but we come pretty close to covering costs, right? I don't know if we cover it, but we get close.
Between some caucuses cover more and some don't, but overall, we pretty much break even on the caucuses.
All right, yeah, so I think people understand that's the goal, they'll donate.
That funding thing, to get it going, if you're gonna contribute, that's the time for you to do it. Say you're gonna put in $5, bring a $5 bill and say, I'll start it for $5, pass it on, because an empty bag will scam.
But yeah, by bag, he means these things. You've all got a bag somewhere, has your precinct on there, so Tim can track where everything came from, and you just turn that in with everything else when you come to the caucus / drop-off point. Okay. Next, to start really digging into caucus business, you need to elect a caucus chair. So that's why you're referred to as conveners. You're getting the caucus started. The caucus is run by a caucus chair who has to be elected. And technically speaking, somebody else could run for chair. And if that were to happen, you have to have an election. You offer yourself as a candidate. Whoever else wants to run the caucus can offer themselves as a candidate. And you have to have each person just say for a moment why they ought to be the chair. In your case, it's because you went through all the convener training, you know what all the stuff is. To my knowledge, we haven't had a fight over caucus chair anywhere around here for a really long time, but it has happened in one of our neighboring Senate districts. I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I forget which caucus, which election it was for, but so it's not impossible, but it's extraordinarily unlikely. And if someone else runs for chair, you're still pretty much going to win despite the board training. But you have to do it.
Eric, what do you do in the case where you're convening a caucus outside of your home? No one wants to be chair.
Well, remember, we're not talking about precinct chair, we're talking about caucus chair.
That's just for this night.
Just before the day.
Which is a good reminder. Explain that to the attendees because they also might confuse the two. The caucus chair runs the caucus for that night, and that's it. So it's like at the convention when we elect convention chairs at the beginning, and then we elect party officers, including the chair, as part of the convention business. It's the same thing. So caucus chair is just for the caucus. Okay. You also need to pick a secretary it's good if you arrange that ahead of time, but probably somebody will volunteer to do it. Technically, it's an election. A quick, the fast way to do it is just ask for a volunteer and ask, I would entertain a motion to have this person just volunteer to be elected our caucus secretary, and it'll be a unanimous vote. That's pretty much always how it works. And this is somebody who's going to help you do all the paperwork. Now, when I ran caucuses myself, never found out a really fast way to do it. I always stayed like an hour after the caucus getting paperwork done, because that's why I don't want to give you an idea of the procedure, because obviously mine's bad. But the secretary's there to help you with this stuff. They, at a minimum, somebody else to have a second set of notes so you remember what happened, and to make sure that like the delegate forms get filled in, to mark which resolutions passed or failed. So it can be that person can be very useful. All right, and you also need to elect a couple of tellers, and that might be more of an issue this year because of the presidential balloting. You could suggest a volunteer, a supporter from the Hillary campaign, a supporter from the Bernie campaign. Or if you only get 2 volunteers, I guess you just get 2 volunteers. And technically, again, they've got to be elected, and they will be the ones who actually count the presidential ballots. And we'll get to those procedures in a bit.
You can have more than 2 if you want.
According to the rules I got from the party, it's 2 and you can have other observers. Only the 2 tellers can actually handle ballots, and the caucus chair. Those are only 3 people who can actually touch ballots. You have other observers, as many as want to observe, but they just look. No ballot touching involved.
But nobody knows if you follow that real close or not.
I'm not going to know. And if you don't tell me it's not a problem, I'm going to assume it's not a problem. That actually is the general rule. If you don't tell me it's a problem, I assume no news is good news, because I don't really have a choice. Election judges. We don't elect election judges. What happens here is we might recruit election judges because the election officials try and get judges from the different parties. And actually, they usually get just a flood of people in our district from the DFL, but if people are willing to be election judges, that is something that can be marked. That's actually on the sign-in forms. I will be an election judge. That's a box that they can tick for themselves. So you're just mentioning that and the reason why we need election judges here from the DFL. Probably not as big a deal as it is for us. For us, as it is for like Republicans, who I'm sure have trouble. This might be their entire district in this room. It's pretty small.
They get paid too, actually.
Yeah, election judges do get a little bit of pay for it. And now is when you elect the actual precinct chair, and you get 2 vice chairs. So again, this is not the same as the caucus chair. The precinct chair and the vice chairs hold that position for the next 2 years, ending with the next precinct caucus. And the precinct chair is a member of the SD63 Central Committee. The vice chairs are alternates to the SD63 Central Committee. Though you can explain that in the way things actually work, unless we have like a really hotly contested vote, like if we were endorsing for a special election, that kind of thing. We don't really worry about informally who's the chair and who's the vice chair. Everybody shows up, gets to participate. Most of our votes, we talk things to the point where they're unanimous or close to it. Anyone who's willing to step up and say, I'm willing to do something, we'll take them. We don't care what you're elected to. Actually, we put people who weren't elected to anything in charge of like committees and whatnot, because they're willing to do it. But for someone who wants to get involved and wants to get started, precinct chairs are really good place to start, because you're not expected to know how everything works yet. We'll guide you along with it. And it mentions in the description, precinct chairs typically convene their precinct's caucus, and they're a member of the Central Committee. The last couple terms, I've asked precinct chairs to call their caucus attendees. Those of you who are precinct chairs, you got those lists, and hopefully you were doing your phone calling these last 2 years. I might not do the same thing this time, because you might get flooded with people who are just going to vote and leave and really don't want to be called over and over, and you might have these massive lists that are kind of unwieldy. I'll have to figure it out. What I might do is just have you call people who actually got elected as convention delegates. Right. I know, I haven't quite worked it out. Marty?
Might I suggest that you just tell people to give their email so they're not going to get called constantly.
That's good. All right.
If you want to save yourself the hassle of the phone calls, give us your email.
So as I think, a reason I wanted phone calls instead of emails was I wanted to be in person, because when I was a precinct chair, I did call all my caucus attendees. for that 2 years, whenever the party was doing something. And we got a door knock Wednesday, or can you come help? The fundraiser is coming up, can you attend? And it didn't just get people to go to stuff a little bit more, but they knew me. I established, like my phone instead of email, I established that personal connection. I became the face of the party for them. And I did this in 2010. In 2012, every precinct had a decline in caucus attendance, except my precinct. We had I'm sorry if it sounds like brag, it's the truth. I had the only precinct with an increase in attendance, and yes, I do think it's because over those 2 years, I occasionally called people and kept in contact with them, even if they didn't do anything. They knew who I was and they appreciated the phone calls. So actually, Martin, I'm going to really disagree with you. I do think they like the phone calls if we'll do them and we're in person, because it's an individual that they will come to know.
I'm just saying you're gonna have a flood of people that, not that.
True, but they're probably not going to stay, and if we do just delegates, that won't be an issue.
Okay.
Like I said, it'll depend on your precinct. If your attendance numbers aren't that big, maybe it'll make sense to actually call people to scratch off people who don't want to be called again. If a larger precinct, there might be too many. Tim?
Gender balance, and your precinct chair and the associate chairs can't all be the same gender, unless that's the only one who volunteers. But
Yeah, if you got 3 women or 3 men, or you have 2 women or just 2 men, they get elected and you don't worry about the gender balancing. If you can get like 1 man, 1 woman, or 2 and 1, if you can fill all 3 spots, you want to do the gender balancing.
So where's now, say this again, where you're using the gender balances?
Let's explain to you. Because what Tim just said, that's all in here about how the gender balancing works.
Okay, yeah.
It's like we do elect delegates at the convention, where we're supposed to have equal numbers of men and women, and we drop that if we just don't get that many of one gender or the other who want to run. Yeah, Bob? Oh, I sure saying something else. But you got my attention instead. Well, good, did you?
I think Marty's point though, it isn't against what you're talking about, but it's another way. Some people are real reluctant to give out any of their information, and that might be an excuse for you to get their email.
That's true, because the party might want to email them stuff. They will want to email them stuff. So if that gets somebody's email, just say, if we have your email address, that means fewer phone calls. That is probably true. Not the district level, but the state party level, yeah, that is the case. So Marty is right after all. Well, which is usually the case. All right.
I'm sorry I brought it up.
That happens whenever you bring anything up. That's how life works. Okay, and there's a procedure for holding election if for precinct chair if you need to in here. You're probably not going to need to. The odds are very heavy that you'll be asking for volunteers. Not all of you are even going to get 3 people willing to run. In which case you have a chair and 1 vice chair, and keep your eye out over the course of the term for some key individuals who seem to want to do something. Tell them, hey, you want to get involved? We got this vice chair 2 spot. We didn't fill the caucuses. Are you interested? Because we have filled a lot of these precinct spots during the term. All right, 7:30, you're supposed to start elections for delegates and alternates. Again, if because of the crush of people you're getting, you couldn't get started on time and you're not ready to start electing delegates yet at 7:30, elect them as close to that as you can, but you have to get through this other business first, so just do delegate election as you can get to it. And we do the delegate elections basically in 1 chunk, Senate districts, and then county, and those of you in Minneapolis will have to have Minneapolis elections also. And the procedures are the same for all of them, but the number of delegates varies widely. So you start with the Senate District Convention, and you can explain briefly what happens at a convention, because there will be people who don't know. So we will endorse for state legislative offices, we elect the local party officers, we vote on resolutions that pass through the precinct caucuses to be sent on to the state convention. We'll get guest speakers. We elect delegates to the state convention. Sometimes that's the big thing people really are interested in. This year I got a feeling nobody's going to really care, because about the only thing the state convention is going to do is elect national delegates.
Right.
I think that's why the parties, this is the first time since I've been active that's in Minneapolis, because it's a 1-day convention and I bet attendance is going to be light. But for the Senate district, we want to get people, it's also another level of getting people to be active and to be involved, because we certainly try and push them to, now to come to the convention, come to the door knock, and do the whole thing. So tell people the time, the location, it's written right there. As far as the election of delegates, you've got some delegate forms here. Oh, I probably should have started with this earlier. This was a precinct caucus report where you put down who got elected as caucus chair, who got elected as precinct chairs, how many people were present, the donations collected, how many delegates you managed to elect. So this is like the overall report. But there are blanks in here for delegates and alternates. And some of you have forms that say 2014, they're identical to the ones that say 2016. So we were cheap. I decided not to throw out usable forms, because that's like 3 more sample ballots or something. But I highlighted delegates in yellow or alternates in pink to avoid trying to mess them up. The majority of you will have no alternates, because most of you probably will not even fill your delegate spots. So that means the simplest way to hold an election is to ask for volunteers, and if you don't fill all your delegate spots, you can try and talk people into going. If you get some, terrific. If you have fewer people who want to run than you have delegate spots, everybody's a delegate. And just make sure that they enter their information correctly on here. We want it in both places. We want redundancy. So we want their information on the sign-in and on the delegate list, so that when we're doing data entry, if we can't read one, we got a second shot at trying to read handwriting. If you've got more people than you've got spots, you have to figure out who would run for alternate. A very simple way, people who've been doing this for a long time know that alternates who show up are really just about guaranteed to get upgraded to delegate, because there always be delegates that don't show up, and they will often volunteer to be the ones who are the alternates. That's why you'll see people who've been around a long time going, yeah, I'm an alternate, new guy can be a delegate. That's entirely where you go, I don't want to spend time on the election tonight, I'll be the alternate.
I think it's important to know that alternates are numbered, and you have to make sure you have alternate 1, alternate 2, whereas delegates are all the same.
Right, delegates are equal, alternates get upgraded in order, but alternates tend not to show up either.
They need to be gender balanced too, though.
If you've got that much of a contested election, if you've got more people than you can fit, then you'll need to worry. For the Senate district, only a few of you will have alternates, and you'll have just a few alternates. I cannot see it getting to that point.
I mean for the numbering, because a lot of times, like, I'll volunteer to be alternate number 1. Well, then alternate number 2 needs.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, do the gender balancing there. You probably won't have enough people where you really have to worry about it, though. So don't sweat the Senate district thing too much. This one's much more about recruiting than electing.
What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do in the case where 24 people came to your precinct caucus, or your caucus, and 12 men are elected as delegates and 12 women are are the alternates?
That would be bad.
Yes, it's at that point you'd have to, you want gender balance on both things, so what would you do in that case?
6 men get to be delegates, 6 women get to be delegates, and the other 12 are the alternates. And again, you have to figure out the ranking.
So like when you're electing them, you might say, we have 12 spots, so we need 6 males and 6 females for delegates. So we got that.
Don't go there unless you have an excess number of people. And don't sweat this at the Senate district level, not gonna happen. You're barely gonna have enough delegates, and most of you probably won't even do that. So everybody wants to be a delegate, is a delegate. It can be more contested for the city and the county. We've got fewer Minneapolis spots, and in Hennepin County, nobody gets more than 3 delegates. On the other hand, you might still have to talk people to running for county, because for most of us, there's literally nothing to vote on. Commissioner District 5 is up, but to my knowledge, nobody's running for endorsement for it. And there is no Hennepin County DFL anymore. The congressional districts now are running the Hennepin County endorsing convention. I don't know how much you're going to want. Probably no one's going to care about the details. And if you want to know the details of that, I'll fill you in. But basically, there's going to be a county-wide convention that is also going to be a picnic. I assume it's because they're asking people to go for the shortest convention ever, so they're gonna have a picnic too. And anybody can go to that, the picnic part anyway. We have no, because there's no Hennepin County DFL, there is no county officers to vote for, no countywide offices are up. And so those of us coming from commissioner districts that are not up for election this year, which would include District 4, which is Peter McLaughlin's district, the only thing to vote on are the convention chairs and listen to the guest speakers, and we're done. So it might not even be contested when you got one delegate, it might be nobody wants to go, possibly.
We have the city convention, the county convention, which we were just talking about.
Yep.
And then we don't have a ward convention, we just have
No.
a district convention.
No ward convention. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the absentee form, don't ask me why, maybe some cities do have ward conventions, it's supposed to cover the entire state. And I'd like to participate at my local convention, it has a bunch of levels here. Organizing unit is either county or senate district, in our case senate district because we're metro. If somebody marks either senate district or organizing unit on their absentee form, that's senate district, just go ahead and count it. And city and county refer to the conventions I'm talking to. Ward, I don't know I don't think anybody's gonna mark ward. If they do that, I don't know if they're leaving you free to elect them to the city convention, maybe?
No.
There's probably nothing you can do. I don't think that'll come up though, but the thing that could confuse people is organizing unit is on here separate from county and senate district and city. Organizing unit means senate districts. Just take that as the same thing.
So shouldn't we have a sheet for each one of those conventions?
You do. Let's see here. So I was showing you the Senate District delegate sheet. These larger ones here are for the city of Minneapolis.
Yeah, I know.
And you've got one more.
The city of Minneapolis one this year is only school board is all that's up there. We have one citywide school board seat, and we have 3 district seats, none of which are in our area, they're in the west side of the city.
Right.
And that, and then resolutions and officers, and that's all. So, city convention this year is not a whole lot involved in that either.
Yeah, you might not
Unless you're
fill
really
your
interested in
slots for the
schools.
city either, just for school board. It's hard to say, because remember what the school board election was like 2 years ago. So, interest actually could be kind of interesting.
People who are involved in schools will be,
yeah.
want those delegates.
This is the county delegate form. Again, it's one of these 8.5 by 11 sheets that mixes in with all the other 8.5 by 11 sheets. So that's why you want to go through ahead of time and pick that out.
That's the one that says Hennepin County on it.
Right.
Then I have another, and you should have one for delegates and one for alternates, right?
Right.
And then I have another one that's
Yeah.
Minnesota DFL Party 2014, precinct caucus report. 2016.
We just reused the leftover 24. The only thing that changed was the year. So we're too cheap to throw those out.
And this, that's what you were saying, and this is
Yep.
for then the Senate districts?
Right. So I said Minnesota DFL Party precinct caucus report. Let's see.
And it doesn't say.
And it says, and it also notes it says organizing unit on it. That's us, SD63.
Okay, it just
Precinct.
wasn't, it's just not written in, so.
Right. How many delegates you were allowed, how many delegates you actually elected, how many alternates you actually elected.
So that's where we put the delegates for the Senate district.
Right.
Might be important right now, if you have that form in your hand, to change it from 2014 to 2016. So if for some reason, somewhere down the line, the paperwork will go in the right place.
It's not gonna get mixed together because we're not gonna assume anybody's electing for 2014 at this point. And so it's gonna, we're not gonna mix it. If it makes you feel better, feel free. We're not gonna mix it up. It's gonna come out of your envelope. Or if you want to, you can put in like 2018 and really get get us worked
You
out.
might save people asking questions if you fix
Yes,
it.
right.
Yeah. Well, remember, you don't leave the sheet sitting out where attendees can see it. This is for you and the secretary, and maybe you have your precinct chairs help you fill it out. Anybody else you have filling out? Those are the only people who see. No, wait, yeah, take that back. You might decide the best way to fill in the delegates is to have the delegates write in their own information. Go ahead and scratch out 14 and put in 16 then.
Shouldn't we also have a sheet for the city delegates?
Yes, you do.
Yeah, it's
Blue and yellow.
Yeah. It's a legal size.
Oh, it's that one,
I
okay.
didn't get one of those, I'm assuming.
You're not gonna get one of those.
Because I live in Richfield, right?
Richfield did not get Minneapolis sheets.
Hey!
So, since it's not, I will alert our Fort Snelling convener Fort Snelling does get a Minneapolis delegate because you're in the school district. Okay, so I mentioned this, I couldn't find it before. You have a small agenda, so you can have that handy with sample rules. Oh, one more, I'm sorry to back up. One more thing to put out. This is the SD63 caucus location, so if you got somebody in the wrong place, we don't have the means right there to look up their correct precincts, but if they can figure out what precinct they're supposed to be in, we have the precinct and the school or facility and the address for that facility if they're in entirely the wrong building, which easily could happen.
Eric?
Yep.
Kevin Boyle. I'm gonna probably bring a laptop with me and have access to the Secretary of State's caucus location finder. So you just enter someone's address in and you'll be able to determine their precinct.
You can do that with smartphones too, most of them. You can look up what precinct their address is in and say, oh, you're in a room down the hall or the next school down the.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. If you can do it, you might have a big pile of people and the people who are lost might not even tell you. Again, see what your circumstances are.
Yeah, or use your map.
You don't have the number for the precinct caucus, the Fort Snelling one listed. The one that's gonna be held at Betts home.
I don't? Well, wait.
I mean, it doesn't have the ward precinct number listed, it just says Fort Snelling.
Oh, yeah, because Fort Snelling is its own precinct. The whole fort is one precinct.
Yeah.
It's just not Fort Snelling.
The Betts home is a separate precinct within the city of Minneapolis.
Right, but we have Ward 12, Precinct 7, that's where I am,
That's
Yeah.
but it has its own Betts ward precinct, doesn't Fort Snelling have a ward precinct?
No, there's not a city of Fort Snelling.
But it's in some city, isn't it?
No, Fort Snelling's not in any city.
So it's considered Fort Snelling.
No, what is this? Fort Snelling is still federal land, and for voting purposes, now that people live there, they're in Hennepin County.
Alright.
And apparently for school district, they're in Minneapolis, but they actually aren't in Minneapolis for any other purposes, so they don't get to vote in like the park board or city council elections.
The person referring that needs to, so I haven't talked to them yet, because I sort of wanted to touch base with them.
Okay, yeah, you two need to chat.
All
All right.
Tell them at least where the room is.
Okay, all right, so having gotten through your election of 2 or 3 sets of delegates, I'll mention one more thing. Under the rules, if people want us to have a walking sub-caucus, and enough people want to do that in order to qualify for a delegate, under party rules, you have to do it. No matter how pointless it may seem, that's the rules.
Why would they want to?
Yeah, why would they want that?
Good question. To my knowledge, it has not happened anywhere in 63 or the old 62 in this century.
Sometimes.
So it's not happened for a long time.
If you've got more people running, if you've got more people running for delegate, if you got 40 delegates and you got 50 people running, that's why you use sub-caucus.
Then it has not to my knowledge come up anywhere, because even if you've got more people in the room than you have delegate spots, usually they don't all want to be delegates, or they don't want to go through it either, and they'll think of some better way of holding elections. But just in case it comes up, in the guide toward the back, I call it an appendix, is the instructions for running walking sub-caucuses. You don't have to have detailed knowledge of them, know the instructions are there, know where to look for them. The odds that you're going to need them are really minuscule. Yeah, Tim?
One of the reasons you sometimes get it is the Hillary people or the Bernie people want to know how many of the delegates that were elected were their side. So they ask for a Hillary and a Bernie walking sub-caucus. Often you can avoid that by saying, when the people are running for delegate, why don't you name which presidential candidate you're supporting? And then they won't do that. But in our district, they haven't done it much.
I'm really
They have
reluctant.
more sense.
I'm really reluctant to push people that direction, because the number of national delegates each presidential candidate gets is depending upon the presidential poll. Our election of delegates to the Senate District Convention has nothing to do with it. That's why I don't even like that the absentee form asks what presidential candidate people want to support. I think it's part of what misled people to thinking it's an absentee ballot form. Our delegate election is unconnected to the election of the national delegates, except in deciding which individuals get to be the delegates. But the number of delegates each candidate gets is unconnected at all.
So you're saying it's all connected to the presidential ballot? They cast it beginning into the meeting before they ever.
Right, so we've already decided how many delegates each candidate gets.
right.
So all we're deciding is who's going to the Senate District Convention to like, endorse for state legislature. And if you want to be the national delegate, it would be good if you get yourself elected to the Senate District Convention. You can run for the state convention, and you can run for national delegate. But if you're not interested in being a national delegate, you don't really have any reason to care. Yeah, Wendy?
Eric, do we count the ballots and announce at the caucus who won?
Yep, we will get there.
Oh, okay, okay.
Can I actually accidentally caused a walking sub-caucus at the first thing.
Shame on you,
It is a guilt. I
Felicity,
carry
go
back.
outside.
Leave the building now.
Let me explain, because this will help people avoid that. The reason I did it was that the voting process to get delegates done, there were far more people than there were delegate slots. And it looked like I was not going to be able to get to be a delegate, based on the way they were doing it. So if you have a lot of people and you're trying to keep gender balance, take a minute to think about how you're putting it forward, because otherwise somebody who's reading the rules could do what I did. And it was a bad choice, and I'm not happy about it, but don't rush through that if you've got a lot of people wanting it and you're trying to get things balanced. Think it through and try to figure out how to do this so that everyone can get what they want. And if that's not possible, then that's what we're stuck with. The walking sub is what we're stuck with. But it was because people were rushing that I accidentally did that.
All right, they'll repeat something said early on. Be methodical, take everything bit by bit, run things as if you were, like everybody was there for the first time and didn't know what was going on, because they'll take care of the people who are there for the first time and don't know what's going on. And they'll pretty much do things as you ask them to do it. All right, so having gotten through the delegate elections, next we elect for the SD63 pre-convention committees. Don't skip, I think some precincts skipped that last time. And I can understand sometimes nobody wants to volunteer to be on these, and so you don't have to hold up the caucus for a long time trying to drag somebody into volunteering for every committee. But we do need somebody on these committees so people do the work. What you might do, and this is kind of how I suggested the wording here, is tell people what all 6 committees are, and then ask for volunteers willing to be on a committee. Each precinct is allowed 2 per committee, so you don't need to worry about elections unless you get more than 2 people who want to be in the same committee. And the only time I'm aware of that ever happens is for the rules committee if we have an endorsement contest, which we don't this time. So 2 years ago, our rules committee were 2 people. The convener who watched and do everything, and one decent guy showed up for the first thing he'd ever done with the DFL, and they got done in a short time. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that happens again.
Eric, would you take just a few seconds and in 2 sentences to please explain what all 6 of those committees do? So everybody
All right, sure.
knows, as they're explaining it to their.
The Constitution Committee reviews our SD63 Constitution and suggests any changes that they see fit, and those get voted on by the convention. Nominations screens candidates for the district-wide offices, so that would be the chair, vice chair, secretary, outreach, treasurer, directors, and our state central committee delegates that we elect at the Senate district level. Credentials is going through all this paperwork you're turning in, and the data entry that was done, making sure everything was done correctly, figuring out who was a delegate, who was an alternate, that they got contacted, and that's, and we're getting things ready for the convention.
Right.
Did I leave anything out, anything important out? That's good, okay.
That's where they also tell if you're in the right precinct.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and if somebody's in the wrong precinct, at the Senate district level, it's actually not gonna matter a lot, because the quote-unquote punishment is they become the last alternate in their proper precinct, but they show up, they're still gonna get upgraded. They'll just be wondering why they're getting an alternate badge to start out with. Resolutions, goes through all the resolutions you pass, and puts together the ballot that we vote on at the convention. Arrangements sets up the physical space. And rules figures out the rules and agenda that we vote on at the beginning of the convention.
Can I?
Yep.
On resolutions, I have this one, probably the only people there that there might have been one or two resolutions, but she's got a handful of them. At that point, could we as a caucus, just to decide that we'll okay all the resolutions so that we don't have to read every one of them and vote on every one of them?
The caucus can make its own rules for how you want to handle resolutions. They don't have to follow suggested rules. If a caucus says, well, we'll accept anything put forward, I guess they could. I'd be very surprised.
Because it goes on to the next committee and they decide whether, hey,
well, the next committee doesn't decide if they approve the resolutions. They just put the ballot together. They just decide if these resolutions are the same as what's for the precincts, so we only put it on there once instead of having it on there. You know, there are 18 precincts passed this. They don't want to put it on the ballot 18 times. That's what the resolutions committee does. It's the convention that decides if it passes. So you can do that. I'll be very surprised if people are willing to vote on resolution sight unseen. Judy?
I'm in a precinct that, I have Beckettwood in my precinct, and I need to tell you that tons of attendees come, and they all bring stacks of resolutions. They've worked on those, and worked on those, and worked on those. And every single time you say, let's put resolution to the end, they say the resolutions are the most important thing to me. We would like resolutions to be second. We want to take the time in our caucus. That's what we care about issues. We're issues people, and this is what we want to do.
Okay, the time to address that is at the beginning of the caucus when you've got an agenda. If people want to change the agenda at the beginning of the caucus, they can. If they want to change it in the middle, that takes, I think that typically takes a 2/3 vote to change the agenda. So you can do that. You can say, all right, is there a motion to change the agenda and it requires a 2/3 vote, and see if you get the 2/3 vote to change the agenda. If the caucus wants to do that, that's just fine. So, Tom, you had your hand up?
I would, especially if there are a lot of resolutions, I would highly recommend that, and most people will agree, I think, to skip the whereases and go right to the meat of the, because the whereases can go on for hours if you read all the whereases.
And they don't count. The
Right.
resolutions committee will ignore all those and just take the action line. So if people ask your advice in writing these things, tell them, whereases won't matter, your action line has to speak for itself.
What Judy mentioned, and there are a lot of people in our area who are really into issues and resolutions. That's kind of a way you say, let's move quickly. Who wants to volunteer to be a delegate to these conventions? Do that process quick so we can get on the rest. That's kind of a thing to encourage them to proceed with the regular agenda, but just do it quickly so we can get to our resolutions.
Now, this probably won't come up given that I'm expecting more like delays because of the balloting, but maybe especially in a smaller precinct, if you find that you've gotten through the business fast and it's not yet 8 o'clock, so you can't stop the voting, slow down the resolutions process. I had to do that when a caucus I ran where I actually needed to stall for time before we could count the ballots. And resolutions are way. Take them slow, encourage people to have more speaking time, just, watch the clock. It could potentially happen.
Resolutions have to be submitted though on this form you gave us.
Unless we run out of forms. If we run short of, the number of forms you've got are just a guess as to how many you're gonna need. I could be wrong. If you think you need more, make more. If you run out, bring, I don't know if I mentioned, bring extra paper with you, just blank paper, and we'll take whatever they're written on. But the forms are preferred because they're easier to read for the committee.
A lot of people will bring in resolutions pre-printed from an organization they belong to that said bring this in. Usually those are in pretty good shape. They're nicely printed and they have the right stuff on it. They may not have the top part of the resolution form of which committee it goes to, but you take them if they're understandable.
There is no quorum requirement.
No.
So one of the things is the business can go on and people who want to work on resolutions can stay and vote on resolutions even if other people choose to leave.
There's no quorum requirement. And it's happened at some small precincts. I wish Ann was here to hear this. It's happened in some really small precincts that the convener's been the only one who stayed. That's happened after the last election, right? Yours? That's a couple, okay.
I just sit there and smile.
Do you let the meeting go on long?
I sit myself for an hour debating resolutions.
All right, the small precinct, I guess you can pass whatever you want to pass and elect yourself to everything. All right. And make sure to mention when picking volunteers for these committees, and it's right down here in bold, the location and time and date for the pre-convention committees. It's the Saturday right after the caucuses, March 5th at Washburn Library, 10 to noon. And most committees are not gonna need 2 hours, people are worried about that. All right, so elect people to those committees. Like I said, you're probably gonna have to worry more about recruiting volunteers and holding an actual election, but if you've got 3 people who wanna be in the same committee, yeah, it's an election, they get to say, take 30 seconds, a minute, whatever you allocate, to say why they wanna be on there, and the caucus votes on who gets those spots.
And so that meeting at the Washburn Library for the committees, is that for all 3 conventions, or are we just talking?
Just for SD63.
Just percentages?
It's
So
different.
we're not worried about.
The only thing you're worried about for the Minneapolis and Hennepin County conventions is the actual election delegates. Don't worry about pre-convention committees.
We're not involved with that at all?
Not at the caucus. I might be asking those of you in Minneapolis to help with the Minneapolis pre-convention committees, but that's a whole separate outside process. I don't even know how it's gonna work for the county.
I forgot that that's how it works.
All right, at 8 o'clock, balloting ends unless you've got people in line. People who are in line before 8 get to vote. People who come after 8 do not get to vote. And as quickly as you can, you want to tally votes, that's what your tellers are looking for. And you've got a tally sheet here. Here we go. It looks like you've got the same thing twice because you do. The party sent 2 tally sheets on a page. I decided to give everybody the whole page of 2 tally sheets. So if you screw up the top, you've got the bottom. So you've got 2 shots at it. The party recommends that the ballots get sorted into piles by candidates, which sounds like a pretty good method to me. And then you count how many are in each pile. I'm going to request that you do a recount regardless of whether anybody has any doubts about the vote count. Just be sure no one's thinking something funky happened. You just count the ballots, count, now do it again, and make sure it's not going to take very long. Yep.
So the balloting will stop at 8 regardless of what time you started the meeting?
Right, because the balloting starts at 6:30 and it stops at 8. It has to start at 6:30, and except for people already in line, it has to stop at 8. So take a look at the ballot procedures here. It's a 2-page thing. You want to look on the back. I'm going to argue with the state on one part. There's one part where I'm not going to hold you responsible for it. If anybody isn't happy about it, they can yell at me. I don't want them yelling at you for it. It says as soon as you have the tallies, you're supposed to report them to me, like immediately. I don't want you stopping the caucus to phone me. If I get a call from you, I want it to be because a problem came up, you got some question that no one else has an answer to, don't phone me with your tallies.
Eric, do we have your phone number?
Yeah,
Do we have your phone number?
it's in here like 3 times. Yeah, because I'm going to be at Gene McGenius's house, which is our drop-off point / party location. And I got off my computer there. Bring your tallies with you, and you can see that I entered them correctly, and everything's good. And I think that the world can wait an extra half hour, 45 minutes to find out how SD63 voted for president this year.
Since there's about 6 southern state primaries the same night, Super Tuesday all over, and the news
Yeah,
is gonna be full of them, so.
Okay, so I am kind of going against the state party here. I don't think it's such an emergency that we get our count out like 1 minute sooner if we possibly can. It's not that important. And if somebody doesn't like it, don't interrupt the caucus and tell unhappy people to yell at me, which is actually a general rule. But really, if anybody isn't happy about the way things are running, tell them to yell at me. I don't want you taking the heat.
You do
So you
announce
don't
the
care-
number to the caucus, right?
Yes, you can, announce the number to the caucus. Just don't interrupt the caucus and phone it in. Yep.
So you don't care about these totals until we, the conveners, or whoever chaired the meeting, bring you the stuff. You can wait that long.
I can wait. I want you to take care of the people who are sitting there in the room with you.
But what if the meeting's over with now and I have, a half hour or something where I gotta tally all this stuff? Do you want me to call you then, or you can wait that long?
I can wait. Come to Gene's, have a snack, give me your tallies. You can observe that I entered them correctly. You have another snack, and you commiserate with the other conveners and whatnot about how things went. All right, we got off on talking about resolutions already, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I'll just say there's a suggested rule in here for how long everybody speaks. play it by ear. You can kind of tell if there's a lot of people who really want to speak up on something, maybe you extend debate. Often you won't even have 3 speakers on a side.
Terry?
Yes.
On resolutions, it helps to have people that have brought them, have them hold them up or have them turn them into the secretary who can kind of sort through them, because a lot of times you'll get several people at the same resolution and you don't want to bring it up more than one.
Yeah, and you can
or
sort
very
that
similar ones.
in process too. Before adjourning, make sure you have handed out the convention calls to the delegates. If you forget this part, we have to mail them out, and that's very time consuming and really expensive. And if we somehow forget, we have problems. We get credentials challenges maybe and so on. It's really important to hand these out. So those of you in Minneapolis have these yellow things that are for the Minneapolis convention. You've all got enough for your alternates and delegates. Total, you might fill it out. We had most of our postcards for the Senate district go unused last time just because most people didn't even fill the delegates, let alone start an alternates. We end up with a lot we just recycled. So, I'm taking a little bit of a risk here. And again, if someone's unhappy, they can send the heat my way. You have enough for all of your alternates and a few delegates for the Senate district. It is
Delegates
important that
and
you hand these out. Maybe the best practice would be to hand these out immediately when you've elected that set of delegates. And some people I know make a rule, until the delegate fills in their information on the roster, they do not get one of these.
Yes.
And you explain, fill it out, then I give this to you. The Hennepin ones are different. Hennepin says it's another 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. The delegate is at the top, the alternate is on the bottom, so that's one more reason you want to bring scissors. So when you've elected your delegates, snip this in half, and you've either got 1, 2, or 3 pages, depending upon how many county delegates you think gets. All right, and finally, adjournment. Be good about giving people time to go through the resolutions, but if you're getting bogged down, it's getting late, and you can tell most people are being polite, but they really want to go. An adjournment actually does stop the whole process. And I remember getting this tip from Marty, actually. If you think this might happen, have a ringer in there who, at like 9 o'clock, when you're trying to get out the door, will make a motion to adjourn. Because if that motion to adjourn passes, the process stops.
And it can't be debated.
Yeah, and adjournment can't be debated. So, and the reason we want to worry about getting out by 9 is that we pay extra if we stay longer than 9. That's money out of the Senate district's pockets. It's money that could go to sample ballots. So that's kind of the way I think of it when I'm getting penny pinching with, I don't want to print 5 more pieces of paper and thinking, that's a sample ballot. 1 more sample ballot, I just saved us. Milt?
I saw the dates in there, but I didn't see any date or place for the 5th District Convention.
I might have missed that. Those of you who aren't clear on what that question is about, delegates that we elect to the state convention at our Senate convention also go to the CD5 convention. And CD5 convention, I'm pretty sure it's the first Saturday in May, and it's at South High School. I'm forgetting the time. I'm sure about South High School on the first Saturday of May. But maybe don't even bring that up because people think you're supposed to like delegates to that convention, and you don't. It's just it's not a convention. Oh, good. Okay.
If they come to the Senate District Convention, they will know when the CD5 convention.
Yeah, don't spend time on that. Again, unless you've got one of those dinky precincts where you're trying to stall for time to keep things going until 8 o'clock.
Eric, when's the state convention on the date?
June 4th, Minneapolis Orchestra Hall, not the Convention Center, Orchestra Hall. I forget the starting time. All right, so after adjournment, and sorry I'm rushing, but I did want to have you out by noon, especially in case we can't keep the room. Everything you pinned up on the walls, take down. However you set up the room, put everything back, just because I guess some schools get picky about how the tables and the chairs and whatnot were arranged in that room. So put the room back the way you found it with furnishings, everything off the wall. You shouldn't be your job to pick up garbage, but check in case somebody left garbage behind, and pick up all the paperwork. And then come to Gene McGenius's house. If you're in the habit from having done this before, going to Carol Cummer's house, don't do that, she moved. She doesn't live here anymore.
She does.
Come to Gene's house, it's at 4804 11th Avenue South. There's well, you can't click a link on a piece of paper, but there's a shortened URL you can type into a browser that shows where her house is. And I will be sitting there waiting for you to come in. That phone number is Gene's home phone in case you're trying to figure out where it is. But I'll have my phone in basically I'll be like holding my phone in my hand waiting for emergency calls, so I don't answer.
Basically takes one block off of Chicago, or 2 blocks off of Chicago.
Yeah, roughly speaking, yep.
What's the address, again, address?
The last caucus I ran, they put us in it was a kindergarten room or a first grade room. The chairs, I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. And at that point, there's nothing I could do about it.
At that point, not. So your site coordinator, Susan, check with her about which room you got.
Well,
Once we're there, nothing we can do about it.
Well, I won't be. I'm just raising this question that site coordinators should know that we need at least reasonable accommodation.
Well, for this time, check with her ahead of time. If there are any doubts about the space you're going to be in, check with your site coordinator.
Eric,
Right.
we asked all the schools to have a rack of folding chairs in the hallway in case we get a flood more people than we expected. And they're probably adult-sized folding chairs, you can always go out and get them.
Yeah, Tim specified that in his reservations, so
Take care of
we should
that.
have more seats available.
You did that with Richfield too?
Yeah.
That's literally, they must have put us in the kindergarten room, but for that.
That's pretty because of your behavior, Bob.
Okay, Tom?
I have a comment and then a question. First, I want to thank Eric. I think we should give him a round of applause for everything. And all the other people who put these packets together and everything. But
I want to commend, Helen did like the majority of the work on putting these packets together.
But, my question is, the caucus location is not listed here. I know and sometimes we've had it
No, they are.
on the front.
Yeah.
Two places. You've got a one-pager you can put out where people can see it. And if you look at the last page of the guide/script, it is the school, the address, which precincts are there.
I thought it was going to be on the outside, sorry.
It would have been if I hadn't managed to keep it down to 19 pages, then, yeah.
But,
I thought this would protect it from wear and tear a little bit better.
But basically, my question is, in the past, I have not been paying attention, but this question will make it obvious. In the past, we've had these conventions at our polling location as well as the school on 42nd, where everybody goes to the same place, and I'm just wondering which way are we doing that this year?
I don't know where anybody's polling locations are. I put several precincts in each location, but I use a bunch of different locations because I know in 2008, most districts picked a school, that's where they had all their caucuses, and they had a parking madhouse. People were walking literally a mile from where they parked to get to their caucus locations. Whereas Old 62 have broken it up amongst a bunch of separate locations, and we had, the cramming in the rooms, we're gonna have parking problems. And that's why we're doing this among several locations, and it has nothing to do with anybody's polling place. Tim?
The signs that are pre-printed in there, do say, on the bottom, they say, we vote at whatever
Yeah, I thought
the
that was
polling
nice.
place is. That's real handy when people show up and say, there's 4 caucuses in this school, which one do I go to? Well, look at the thing on the bottom, most people, they don't remember the precinct number, but they do remember, I go to that St. Helena's church. Well, then you're in 12-9 and you go into that room.
Sure, but be aware, polling places sometimes change, so,
Few of them have.
yeah, just be aware that can happen. Brianna?
I have a quick question, and I'm sorry that I had to come late. I had got my data off or something, but for the Hennepin County endorsements for delegates, it doesn't, I don't see a number here, so is it just the amount of spaces that we have?
Oh, I thought it was written, I think it's written on there, isn't it? Let me look.
Not on mine.
On the outside of your envelope, on mine it says SD63.
Yeah, it's just,
It's 13.
let's see, okay.
Well, I have the
all right,
SD
well, first off, on the city, the number of delegates is on the delegate form. I thought it was for the county also.
I found it here somewhere.
No, I don't think it
Right, okay, you know what? I'm gonna have to, email you just to make sure that you got that. So watch for an email from me. I'll be sending everybody an email with your number of county delegates.
It's 1, 2, or 3, and there's no.
Is it 1
It's just that our county-
Well, there's a formula of 1 for 20, but I'm not gonna ask anybody to remember the formula. I'm gonna send you the right number. Ready?
Well, just final thing, if they're not elected to anything or not tellers or anything, you can staff your precinct caucus with volunteers who don't live in the precinct. And you can't get enough people to make it run smoothly, especially with one of these presidential preferences. You can have people running the tables are from St. Paul. Just as
You could, I imagine they'd want to go to their own caucuses, but it's not an uncommon thing to grab volunteers among the, especially the people who arrive early, probably are pretty hardcore, and they maybe even come with an expectation of helping, just recruit the first people in, and they will be able to, they'll be almost guaranteed to be willing and able to help you with the sign-in.
Kids who aren't able to vote can also help.
That could work,
Ballots and
yeah,
things like that.
but try the first people in. All right, just so everybody knows, recording on video, if you missed part of the proceedings here, you can go back over it. I'm gonna try and get that posted like tonight, and you can go over the parts that you missed. All right, so it's noon. I have a suspicion they're gonna kick us out of the room any moment here. Make this the last question.
If you have anything left over, like if candidates bring literature and stuff, send that home with somebody who's supporting the candidate. If nobody wants to take it, bring it to James' house and we'll put it all together and we'll get it back to the campaigns or something.
Or we put in our event boxes.
Yeah, just bring it all.
Actually, let's put in our
Everything out
event
of it.
boxes, because some of the campaigns are really bad about coming out with literature. And the last couple actions, they have been pretty bad about literature. We provided it ourselves out of caucus leftovers. All right, okay, last comment.
No, at the end, when you're done.
All right, I just want to say, I don't think Greg got his flyers, because this is Greg Baston's stuff here. So we need the flyers for 11/8.
Perfect, I was wondering where.
All right, so Felicity gets the last comment. Anything else? Contact me afterwards, because we gotta go.
I'm hustling and soliciting for donations to the silent auction. Also, we're doing a book sale this year. So if you have books that you want to put in, I will be doing, Hal and I will be doing the pricing on books unless you tell me this must be sold at a specific price. But I would love donations of books, political, sci-fi, knitting, cooking. Those would all go well with our crowd. Donations for the silent auction, if you either can talk to businesses or you have something you're gonna put together, please contact me. If you don't know how to get in touch with me, talk to Eric and he will send you my email, which you are now officially authorized to give my email to anyone who isn't creepy.
Well, good. Because I already did, it's right here.
Awesome.
You have to give us one.